So good evening and afternoon, depending upon where you are. I am so excited that you are with us here in the kitchen and on the very first Zoom live edition of Cooking with Curtis. I am so proud to have with me two master chefs that are going to be joining us. And we're calling this section of Cooking with Curtis Dining and Democracy, because in less than 45 days, we will have probably one of each of our most important civic responsibilities available to us, and that's the right to vote. And what we know is that there's a lot at stake, and we want to be able to make sure that folks who are to exercise that right do it responsibly and do it well informed. So while cooking, we'll also be talking about the issues that are most important to us. And so I want to welcome you not only to my home, but to Xavier University of Louisiana. For those of you who do not know much about us, where have you been? We have been around doing what we believe to be the good work since 1925. So we're coming upon our 100th anniversary. We're the nation's only Catholic HBCU, located right down here in New Orleans, Louisiana. We believe that we, through the work that we do with our students, through the work that we do in our community, to the work that we do in scholarship, that we are contributing to a more just and humane society. So this part of this conversation and these sorts of interactions help us to do that and make a better contribution. So with me today are two really amazing and dynamic people. I'll begin with our guest from far away. So we're joined by Professor Anthony Turner. You heard some music in the background as we were starting. Professor Turner is a professor of voice at Wagner College. Has also taught voice at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University, but has found great success as a performer, an opera singer, working very closely with an organization called Opera Ebony, which has roots here in New Orleans, and specifically with some of our sisters here at Xavier. He is this amazing singer. He is an amazing cook, but an even more fantastic human being. So I'm glad, and he can talk about what he has done over the course of his life as we talk. We're also joined by Tia Alexander. So Tia is a senior political science major right from New Orleans, Louisiana. And Tia has been very involved on our campus. When I arrived, she was one of our star RAs, resident assistants, who helped create community in the residence halls. She is now the Chief Justice of our student government, helping to hold folks accountable, but more importantly, right now, helping to educate our community and get folks registered to vote. She spent her last year as an Andrew Goodman Foundation Fellow, thinking about democracy and trying to encourage voter registration, not only here on campus, but with college students all across the country. So no two better people to help begin this conversation than both Tia and Professor Turner. So now I want them just to briefly say hello, and then we'll get started with what we're cooking and get into some conversation. So, Tia.
Hey everyone. Like Vice President Curtis said, I'm a political science senior here at Xavier University of Louisiana, and I've been spearheading all of the voter registration efforts going on campus currently.
And when you, in 20, 30 years, you're going to hear her name being nominated to a Supreme Court.
Hey, that's where life takes me.
When she
I'm still there.
Going to go to law school, she's already preparing for that. And then I have no doubt that you will see her as one of those federal judges who then go on to help create a more just and humane society. And so next we'll have Professor Anthony Turner. So not only do I want to just give a quick little background of who you are, but also a quick little background on what we're cooking. Since Anthony is our master chef, Tia and I will be taking direction from him. So if you could just give an overview of who you are, and then what we're going to be making.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Vice President Wright. Tia, it is my honor to be with you this afternoon, and good to see everybody. As Vice President Wright mentioned, I am a singer. I've done that all my life. I happen to be from Iowa, and you know, it's just, I'm very grateful that I've been able to find my passion in life and to really do it and earn a living from it. Besides teaching, I've had a couple of corporate America jobs in corporate America, but it's been mostly singing for all these years, and I'm very grateful for that. And so when the vice president asked me about fixing something and knowing the time that we had to do it, I said, okay, it can't be major, but I want it to be substantial, but I want it to be just down home. So I decided on candied yams and how I do them. And we know people all over the country do yams various and sundry ways. So I'll talk about those various and sundry ways compared to how I do them. And that's what we have on the slate today. And then of course, we'll be talking about a lot of things. So you'll learn a little bit more about me and the subjects as we talk about them.
Right. So what I will also begin with is that I do not, I cannot own the comments of my guests. They do not reflect Xavier University or Curtis. If you hear something that makes you go, I want to throw something against the wall, blame it on Tia. It is not my thoughts, it is their thoughts. We want them to truly engage.
Okay.
We also want you to engage through the chat function, which so many of you are already doing. So what are our ingredients today, Professor Turner?
Okay, we start with, first I want to show you the pan that I use or something similar. We start with a pan that usually has a lid, but it doesn't have to have a lid, so foil works. And this pan is about almost 2 inches deep and maybe, you know, 6-7 inches wide and maybe at least 12 inches long. And I use this kind of a pan because we want to make sure our yams have room to spread out. You don't want them too clumped together for cooking, and you want them to have some room. So all that juice that we're going to create today is in there. So the pan is important. Then for a pan this size, I use maybe 5 to 6 yams. I may not use all of them depending on how big, but I try to pick them medium, not huge, but medium or on the smallish side. And then light brown sugar or dark brown sugar, whatever your choice is. Cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, some flour, and I think, oh, and regular white sugar. So I do a mixture of both white and brown sugar. And today I'm using dark brown sugar because that's what my hand came to first in my pantry. So then shall we take it away? Curtis, shall we go ahead and dig in?
I think so.
Okay. And I left out one other thing, the butter. I use about 2 sticks of butter that I've got melted in a little saucepan on my stove. And when I melt my butter, I sprinkle in, I realize some of these things I don't measure, but say like a 1/4 teaspoon or a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon in the butter. So here's my saucepan with the 2 sticks melted in it, and I just sprinkle in a little bit of cinnamon. But if you want to measure, use a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon to start. You don't want too much cinnamon because that will overpower everything, and we've got other flavors that we want to bring out. So, well, let's begin to assemble our dish.
And just so everybody knows, you pre-boiled your potatoes, correct?
I did. I pre-boiled the yams, so they're fork tender, so the fork slides through, and boil them in the, as we call it, the jacket, but boil them in the skin. There is a technique where people who will peel their potatoes and boil them, and they'll candy them right in the same pot. That's possible, but that's not what I do. So there you have it.
So what happens, because I started my potatoes a little late, so some of them feel like they're tender to the fork, others are not. So will that mess up my candied yams? Because like one is tender, the other one is a little tough, like Tina Turner and Mary. Some is easy, but others are a little rough.
Well, the thing is that it's, you know, they won't, there's something to be said about how even they cook, because then you'll have to wait for those that aren't quite as fork tender as the others to get done while they're cooking. Now the thing is, they will get done. It's just you got to watch them differently, you know. So it's best to try to have as much together as you can. But if they're kind of there, they should work, because you know we're going to put them in the oven and let them bake for a while, so it should be good.
Okay.
All right. So are your yams drained?
Mine are not.
Okay.
I will get them drained.
Okay.
Mine's
Tia?
still going on the stove.
Okay. So the one thing is, yes, if I drain them, I will sometimes just leave them in my sink. Here's my colander with my yams in them, as everybody can see. But these have been cooled for a little while, so I can hold them. They're still warm. And I always like to cut up my yams while they're warm. I don't want them to be cold, and I don't know why. That's just the way Grandma did it. So that's why I do it. But you're gonna take, for those who have yams that are ready to go, take one of your yams, cut off either end, like so. And I just discard that in there. And then because they've been boiled, they're already soft. Usually the skin will just peel off easily.
Wow.
Just like that, because it starts to separate a little bit from the yam itself. And from there, you've got the sweet potato or the yam that looks like this. Now, what I'll do with this, I cut this one yam that I had in half. I will then cut this in half and then just place it in my dish. And I'm going to do that to several of these and then show you what that looks like.
We already have a question from one of the listeners, and it says, the yam has its origin in West Africa, I believe, and it's a dietary staple in places like Ghana and Nigeria. Do you know if this preparation has any connection to that area of the world, and do you have any experiences with West African dishes like pounded yam?
When I took a trip once with Vice President Wright to Ghana, and we had yams, but I didn't see how they prepared them. And how I'm doing this today is how my grandmother would have done this. And she was Native American. So who knows where, I mean, they are a West African staple over there, but I have no idea really about whether that preparation comes directly from there or not. And here I'm taking my other yam, another one, and you see I've cut off the ends. I'm going to cut that in half and just remove the layer of the jacket, the skin, and I'm going to take it, cut that in half, and just arrange it in my casserole dish.
I will tell you, mine are hot, so I do not recommend taking them straight out of the pot. They're doing it, but.
Well, you know, when I do that, if I usually drain them in my sink and turn them out, and then I can cut them right in the sink, you know, and you don't have to really touch them that way. Yeah, because if you touch them, you're going to burn yourself, of course.
But I sacrificed for cooking with Curtis, so it's okay. I want it.
Okay. Well, I hope they have you on a good insurance plan down there then.
Trisha Diamond wants to know, aren't yams different than sweet potatoes, and does it make a difference if you use yams or sweet potatoes?
It doesn't make a difference, and there is a difference in the sense, for me, it's about the size. When I usually buy yams or when I see them, they are usually huge. And sweet potatoes I always think of as a little bit smaller than a yam. And these actually are yams that I bought, but I still found them on the smaller side. I'm not a fan of using big fat yams, you know. But sweet potatoes, yams, doesn't matter. But the size is kind of what the difference is.
How many are we supposed to cook?
You should cook, now this is gonna be on a site thing for you. You should
have this much.
Okay, do you have a few more?
I do.
Yeah, wait for a minute until you put those in, and then I'll tell you why.
Okay.
because then we're going to do something. And this yam looks a little funny inside that I have here that I cut. So I'm cutting most of that away. It was like speckled or something. And I don't know what that is, so I don't want it. I don't want any funny looking yams in my pan.
Professor Turner, you were talking about whether I hoping that I had a good health insurance plan. If you think about like what's happening right now with the nomination of the new Supreme Court Justice after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what's at stake? And so for many people, particularly lots of college students, people with pre-existing health conditions, the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, is at stake right now because
right.
on the 13th, the Supreme Court will hear a case where the federal government is suing to overturn it.
Right.
When we think about healthcare, you know, it was a funny thing right here. But luckily, I do have good healthcare, but 30 million Americans could potentially lose their healthcare. Could y'all talk a bit about while we're preparing our potatoes or our yams about the significance of affordable healthcare and what this next Supreme Court appointment could mean?
Tia, I'm ready, or do you want to go first? It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, you can go first.
It's important to me because I happen to be on the Affordable Care Act, and it has worked well for me. It has worked really well. I've been very pleased with it. So if by chance the Supreme Court says that, you know, it's you know, cut out, I'm going to be in a world of trouble. And I happen to have some pre-existing conditions. Now, we've heard from this president, of course, that he has a plan that has all of those things in there. It's going to be better, but he's been saying that week by week, month by month, year by year for 3.5 years, actually. So the fact is, I hope that people will start to wake up, and the only way to combat a lot of this is to vote and make sure you vote. But it's going to be horrible if we can't, you know, have health care. My friends in Europe always ask me, why is the US, with all this money and wealth, we have so many sick people? And our life expectancy is shorter than everybody else's. So I tell them, I wish I knew, but I have a theory about that. But Tia, I'll come back to that. I'm gonna give you a chance.
For me, with the ACA at stake, I don't know, I feel like with the new Supreme Court appointment, and if they were to undo it, I just feel like it would set us back so far on all the progress that we've made so far with approaching universal health care in the United States. And I'm not saying that it's perfect. It can be improved upon, but that's a reason why we should keep it instead of, you know, just setting us back and then doing it all together. Why not continue to build on it as a bipartisan effort, you know? And their attempt to take it away, it just makes me wonder, well, what are your motives are if you know that it's still helping a significant amount of Americans and you just want to take that away from them, you know?
Right.
And not only that, but also with women's reproductive rights in America. I'm not sure if it's controversial to talk about because, you know, I go to a Catholic school and I have religious beliefs, but at the end of the day, I think that it should ultimately be up to the woman, regardless of my beliefs or anyone else's beliefs. And I'm concerned about just how far we'll be set back if we get that additional Republican appointee and if they choose to take away Roe v. Wade.
Well, you know, my theory is that, and I want to talk a little bit. Let's keep going with these yams. I want to show everybody what my yams look like in the pan.
Oh, your camera went off.
We lost you, Professor Turner.
Here, am I back? Good.
Yeah.
So here are what my yams look like in the pan. They're not, I had enough for just a nice layer. And what we're going to do next is we're going to start putting on our sugars and our flour. So what I'd like for everybody to do, start with your white sugar. And because I don't normally measure this, I use it by sight. But I know if we start with a cup, what I'm going to do is just sprinkle that lightly over. And I may not use the whole cup, and then again, I might. You know, you can't get it too horribly sweet or not. In this case, because of how many I have in my pan, I'm not even going to use a whole cup. But just know that sometimes I need that whole cup, sometimes I need two. All right, after that, depending on what sugar you have. Now, Vice President Curtis, if you have your one layer there, you can do this in layers. So what I'm doing with my one layer, you're going to do in two. And I'm going to measure out my brown sugar, which I'm using the dark brown sugar today, because that's what my hand came to first. But just realize, normally, guys, I just usually measure by sight, but this is just a guide. So you will do this when you make these again. If you like the way this goes, you will do this in a way that you like, and you can't mess it up. So what I'm going to do is, with my hand, I'm going to take that sugar and I'm going to crumble it over where I put the white sugar over the potatoes. And then say, for our vice president, he's going to do this with the first row, and then he's going to put a few more on top and then do a little more again. All righty. Yeah, it's kind of okay. I'm going to use just a smidge more. I don't know how much a smidge is, so y'all just kind of go with me. Just a smidge more white sugar, and maybe just a smidge more of the dark brown sugar.
Now, Professor Turner, when I drain my potatoes, do you know if there's like a faster way to help them cool down a little faster?
No, I don't know that, because when these boys, they are hot. And so, you know, you want to not put them, I usually, when they're hot like that, sometimes I just turn mine out in the sink. And I can cut them, you know, with the knife in the sink, and then use a spatula or something to take the hot yam and put it in my pan. Right. But no, they just stay hot forever and ever. And they will, when we end up cooking them, they're going to stay hot forever too after you finish bringing them out of the oven.
It's not that bad here.
It's not that bad?
No.
I just don't want you all coming to me for some workman's comp or something like that. Be careful, careful, because those yams are nothing to play with. All right. Let me know where you are in the process before I go any farther. How are you coming, Mr. VP?
I think this is going to be delicious. I can already tell. Now,
and I'm going to show you what my pan looks like too. Yeah, I got to have the paper towels. And actually, I'm going to wash off my hands here. Now, let's talk about alternatives. Some people will, they like to put a little bit of orange flavoring in their yams. I eat them that way. I don't make them that way. Some people like to add a little bit of maple syrup or Karo syrup, which if you're old enough, everybody has Karo syrup in their pantry probably. But that I don't use. I just use the sugars and the butter, and they will make their own juice. Yams are good for making their own juice. And especially with all that good gooey butter and everything down up around in there.
This is what mine looks like now.
That's great. Now, do you have white sugar in there?
I do.
Okay, because I see mine. Well, no, you can't see mine like I see mine. So, okay, you can't go wrong. If you want a little more sweetness, put a little more either the white or the brown in. But the white specifically will give you even more juice. And we want to make sure we have enough juice. And let me know when you're done with that, and then I'll go to the next step.
All right.
Okay, now the next step is the flour. And that you do, the flour I use because that helps thicken this rich juice that you should have in these yams. And so I've got my tablespoon measure. And what I do is I just lightly tap that flour on top of the yams. I don't want, I want it to look like, you know, if you've ever put powdered sugar on a thing and done it like that, that's how I'd like you to tap it on there. And I will tell you at this point, I only need 1 tablespoon of that sugar tapped over to cover everything just lightly. Sometimes I need 2. That's why I put 1 or 2. It just depends. Okie doke.
All right.
All right, now the next thing is we're going to take our melted butter that has cinnamon in it already.
How melted should it be?
It
creamy,
should be like,
I should probably put it back in some more.
Yeah, it needs to look like juice, like you would drink it, but you wouldn't, you know? You know how that fake butter is in the movie theaters when you put it under the thing, the popcorn, and it comes out like that? It should be melted like it's oil. And I'm going to wait till you get it together, and then I'll come back to you. Can I say one more thing about the Affordable Care Act?
Please.
You know, my theory is that if there's an evil plan afoot, that if you keep part of, this is a statement that you don't want to be responsible for, Vice President Curtis, that if you keep part of the population sick, you keep control. And to not have everybody on a healthcare plan and to have everybody be able to operate and function in school. I mean, I know people in school who were hungry, and you cannot think and you cannot learn if you're not healthy or if you haven't had food. And so I think that there's a reason for the grocery stores in the wealthier areas to get those vegetables and things first before they come to our areas. And I think it's planned that way, because then you keep control over a certain segment of, that could be black, it could, because there are more poor whites in the country than there are poor black people, but you know, so that's what I think.
I think there are people who might share your thought process.
Yeah, and make sure that cinnamon's all mixed up down in there.
It smells like cinnamon rolls. And I will admit that one of my, since we've been on our COVID diets, my COVID-19 diet has not been working for me, and I've got like the COVID 48. August 1st, I have stopped having desserts. So I've been looking forward to this because this to me reminds me of a dessert or two.
Oh, it is. And trust me, when I bring these out to guests, they say, oh, this is like dessert.
Well, it'll be my breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, because I'm going to eat as much of it as I can.
And
so
you know, when you get
butter sufficiently melted.
Okay, so what you're going to do is take it and slowly drizzle it over your yams. You may not use all of it. As I say, this is a good place to start, but just drizzle it nicely over your yams, because that'll start, and that cinnamon down in there will start going down in all the right cracks and crevices, you know, start to do a number on the sugars and the flour, and it just starts to put everything together and make it all messy.
Yeah.
Sweet, sweet gooey goodness for the soul.
Now, some people put marshmallows on their candy yams.
Yep. And every now and again, I haven't done that for years, but every now and again, and it's always, we use the small ones. Don't use the big ones, you want to use the small ones because one, they melt faster and it's nice when you get them golden brown, but that always goes on at the very last for me.
Right.
Always the very last, because the yams, you can't hurt them anymore. So that goes on the very last.
So when you say like after they've been cooking or?
No, when they're done.
Oh, okay.
When they're done, put those marshmallows on top and let them brown on top, and it's great. Now, do you have your vanilla?
I do.
Okay.
For people who are perhaps diabetic or pre-diabetic and who might want to make this without all the sugar, how does it work with sugar substitutes?
Well, I wish I knew. You know what? Now, Curtis, my friend, there some things I have done, like a gluten-free chocolate cake for people when they really wanted it. I have no idea what would be a substitute for this. I just have no idea. I know, like today, I've got organic vanilla, but you know, nothing else is organic except the sweet potatoes because they come out of the ground.
I would guess like maybe stevia. Like
maybe, sure, that might work. Stevia, I would say, why not? You know, yeah, it's like I roasted potatoes last night, so I used olive oil, but that's roasting them. So you know, that's a whole different. I'm going off on a whole tangent of stuff. But stevia might work.
Mm-hmm.
It might work.
You know, and I think what I hope we also think about is how do we take control? So, like I said, I've cut out the sugars or the desserts from now until my birthday, December the 26th. And next, starting October the 1st, I'm gonna go vegan.
Okay.
As a way to help me control my intake and not make putting my shoes on an aerobic exercise as it has been for the last few months.
Okay.
When I get cramps when I try to tie my shoes. So I have to figure out how do I control that? And I think oftentimes, not in addition to the food deserts and those sorts of things, and the ways in which particularly communities of color are forced to make do with whatever we got, we find ourselves, you know, sweetening things and putting pork fat and stuff just to make it taste better and sometimes to make it last longer. You know, how do we break those cycles so that we aren't dependent upon
well, but you know, historically, now I've been frying a lot with canola oil, or I've switched up. So I've virtually gotten rid of all of my Crisco oil, except when I make pie crust, I gotta have that, or lard, which I don't, you know, I'm not making a lot of lard crust of late, but I use a lot of oils, olive oil, I've used a lot for things, and canola oil. The thing with canola oil, you have, if you're frying with it, you have to be careful because it heats, I found more, and you have to put it at a lower temperature. Otherwise, it can burn whatever you're doing. And we do need to be careful with the sugars because sweet potatoes, by and large, are kind of sweet anyway. And you think about historically that when people were working in the cotton fields and in the tobacco fields, that we burned off all of that sugar that we were eating. But those days, thankfully, are no longer with us. So that's why we have the problem with all kinds of physical things, because everything has sugar in it. Absolutely everything.
Right. So I think, are you caught up with this, Tia?
Yeah, I'm doing the brown sugar right now.
Okay.
Okay. So then the vanilla is the next thing. Now I said a couple of teaspoons, so I'm going to do that since I said it. But otherwise, you know, I measure that by side too. And we are going to use 2 teaspoons of vanilla for sure. And just like we did with the flour, you're going to just gently sprinkle that in areas of your pan.
Did the flour come before or after the butter?
The flour comes before. The sugars and the flour come before. And it comes after, the butter comes after all of that, because that way it helps not to have the flour lumpy and all that. That's why you sprinkle it on like that. Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of vanilla to get that flavor in there, but as say Vice President Wright, when you put your nose down over there, it should smell kind of good.
It does. I'm not going to know that I can see it.
I should definitely use a cup of flour, right?
Swimming in butter.
No, a tablespoon of flour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what
Can
I
I see that?
Sorry.
Let me see that again, Vice President.
I'm swimming in flour and in butter.
Yeah, and you can probably see mine. Yeah, that looks good. And you can probably see mine a little bit. Looks the same, but there's butter all down there at the bottom. And now, if you have your nutmeg, that I don't measure either. Very tiny amount, because what I like to have come through is the flavor of my cinnamon. And I mean very little nutmeg, just for a different little bit of a flavoring. Yeah, that's enough, I can tell. Good. Now, we have our tops.
I'm using foil.
Okay. Tia, how are you doing? Where are we?
About to do the vanilla now.
Okay. And just, you know, sprinkle it over, you know, like this, the vanilla, when you do that.
You said 2 teaspoons, right?
2 teaspoons, And as I say, you know, it's like grandma when we'd be in the kitchen, she'd see a teaspoon for something and she'd just go bloop, bloop like that with her hand and know it was a teaspoon. That's what I do too.
I'm not there yet. It's amazing how when you've been cooking so long, you can just know what the measurements look like.
Right. And you know, when you use certain pans, like I use this pan most of the time for yams, but because I don't measure it, I do it by sight. And it might be a little different each time, but not really, because you're just used to what it looks like, that's all. Well, I want to smell mine again. Excuse me, I got to take a sniff. Hallelujah.
That's how I make my world famous mac and cheese. I just know I don't have to go into the store. I just know what I'm going to put in there.
Right.
Measurements. Patty LaBelle, if you're watching, I'd be happy to have you on.
That's right.
There is no rum in this Diet Coke. This is, and you see, and I have to catch myself because I've tried to lower my Diet Coke consumption as well. And today is probably my, this is the 3rd Diet Coke I've had. So this, I don't want to have any more Diet Cokes, but I'm going to allow you for that one. Maybe I should put a little coconut juice in there to help add flavor. Maybe that's what I should do.
Okay, I don't know. Well,
because we don't advertise drinking at Xavier. That is not, we don't do that, do we? She didn't even hear me because she knows.
Yeah, right.
Alcohol is of the devil.
Why is there no rum? Oh, okay. Now I see that question.
Besides, I don't, Quitty couldn't give me rum the last time she went out, so we don't have rum in the house.
All right, please don't do that to her. Please don't do that.
She does like a little Diet Coke every now and again, though.
Right, right. All right, Tia, you almost there?
Yeah, I'm caught up.
Okay, then put on your lid. Now there should be, should see, you know, kind of buttery juice in the bottom and all. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Show that to me again. You could afford to put a little more brown sugar, sprinkle more brown sugar on top, and a little bit more white sugar.
I love brown sugar so much.
Mm-hmm.
I like to use it on days when I make homemade pancakes. I like to
Ah.
make brown sugar, use brown sugar to make my own syrup.
Mm. Sounds wonderful to me.
So are
Right.
you going to put it in the oven?
Yeah, it needs to go ahead and put it in because I want to make sure to try to get everything done for us. So,
Or we
huh?
put the pan on top of something?
No, put it in.
Okay.
Just put it in right on the grate.
All right, there we go.
And I'm turning mine up a little bit.
I have brown sugar all over my keyboard right now.
Yeah, it can be like that. Well, guess what? When I don't measure and I just pour out a package and look at it by sight, it's like all over my counter and everything. So, you know.
Poured a little onto my floor.
Well, and the
just edit it out.
well, and I use the lid because if there are too many potatoes or too much butter and juice down in there, when it starts to boil, it can boil up and over. So then you just have that in your in the bottom of your stove. But that's why I use the kind of dish that I have. All right, so now we're gonna put this on. So I turned my oven up because just, you know, time and stuff. I should have finished a pan to have it ready. Now let me go to my seat so we can sit and chat and wait for these yams to do their thing.
So while we were cooking, someone, pardon?
What should I set my timer to?
What time? How's
The timer on the oven.
I usually, for our purposes here, we need an hour possibly, or 45 minutes. The thing is, when we're not in, you know, like in a show thing, you can just say 45 minutes to check, because what you want them to do is to bubble, and that juice to be bubbling and all of that in there. And when it's bubbling, then you know they're ready. And the sweet potatoes are already done. You just want all that gooey goodness to go around in them.
well? Sometimes, you know, I have to stop myself because I'll start eating before it's done. But
you know, and it's done enough that you know, it's good. It's still good. So, you know, let me get this.
Up a little bit.
I saw a question come through.
yeah. So one question I wanted to get to before we move to some real voting and that sort of stuff, because it still connects to ACA. So someone said they work in a mental health agency and it's completely funded by Medicaid. So if ACA is gone, that may completely impact their ability to serve their communities. And she just wants to know, what do we think about how the absence of affordable health care can affect the mentally ill populations of New Orleans? And yeah, and particularly in communities of color where we don't always take full advantage of those resources when we begin to create systems where people trust and where people begin to utilize those services, to then just take it away can be completely devastating. I know that from work that we've done, that I've done through community organizations, a vast majority of folks who find themselves on the streets, whether they're homeless veterans or younger people, many of them are suffering from mental health issues. And so to be able to provide them the services that your organization does is so critical for them to be able to have control. And I just can't imagine what it would look like for them if they didn't have access to that resource.
Well, I have a thought on that, you all. I often think that there wasn't enough money put into mental health services to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, and I will bring up our President Obama, who worked tirelessly, I thought, or as much as possible to try to have that happen, because we have a lot of people, I have a lot of students who are going through issues and need to see someone. And when I'm working at places like NYU or even Wagner, and some of my colleagues have said they don't have enough hours in the day to see the number of people who need to talk about their issues, let alone trying to get medicine or medicines, if you will. I say if the ACA is gone, it's going to devastate whole communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to devastate those rural communities. I mean, I'm from Iowa, so those small rural communities. And what is that going to do to the opioid epidemic? You know, as far as getting help for them. I mean, the list goes on and on. It is vital that if they get rid of this ACA, that we make sure we vote and get these folks out of that Senate for sure, whoever votes for it. That's the only way to combat it as far as I know.
You know, and one of our alums is saying that the biggest dilemma in mental health care is the way that so many states, like Louisiana, have closed their mental health facilities over the last couple of decades, so jails become the stand-in facilities for those facing mental health problems. And I was a part of this Norman C. Francis Fellowship this past year, and one of the conversations we were talking about was the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office was creating these facilities that were for people who had mental health issues. And I couldn't quite understand, why is it that the sheriff is focusing money on mental health, and why? And it was explained to me that because so many of the people that they're arresting have these issues, that he felt that that was the best use of their resources, to create jails equipped to support people who are mentally ill, versus using those monies from the city to create hospitals and mental health facilities that would be trained to help people get better, versus correctional facilities with, I guess, beds to be able to support them. I just, it's crazy. They said the level of healthcare provider, wow, in the country is a Los Angeles County jail. That, when you think about that is the largest mental health care provider in the country. That's horrible.
Well, I'm thinking about just the idea of the setting, you know, so many of those inmates, they do have problems. That's why they're in there, a lot of them. But then you're behind bars. You know, what is it if you can't, you don't need to be there, but you can walk in a yard where there are trees, you know, or flowers or something. I mean, it's like you're putting a person in a double prison. They're in a prison in their mind with whatever they're going through, and then they're in a prison that has brick and wrought iron. I mean,
then on top of that, they're not really doing anything to help them work through those issues that put them in there in the first place.
Right.
Perpetuates a cycle that just keeps everything status quo, pretty much.
Yeah, and what our alum just also said, that police officers are now mental health first responders, and they go through a 4-month police academy for the most part, right? Where they learn a whole host of different things. And I can't imagine that you get the same skill set that social workers or licensed counselors get in those 4 months to then go out and become the people who deal with the individuals, which then you see cases where a family has called in the police to help deal with their cousin or their son who's probably experiencing a psychotic break, and he ends up dead because the police are doing, and sometimes their best, but that's not what they've been trained to do.
Right.
So thinking about ways to be able to equip more community organizations that work with these individuals with the resources that they maybe go along with the officers um, or provide community work before they even get to the place where they need to be called out. I mean, there's just so many issues with that. I know, as attorney, you spent a significant part of your time doing in jail, working with incarcerated young people, um, using music, using storytelling, using poetry as a way for them to have a release. When I first made it to New York, I volunteered with a group called Black Arts Collective. One of my friends worked there, and he did spoken poetry, we did GED classes in Rikers. And if any of you have ever gone to Rikers Island, it is indeed an experience. And so we would go every Saturday or Sunday. And I did that for about a year. And the thing that I noticed first was that 95% of the people were Black or Latino men between the ages of 16 and 30. I think I may have seen one Asian person in a year and probably a handful of white people. And I worked in the space that was called OBCC, Otis Bantam Correctional House, and this was jail within the jail, so they called it the box. And so if a person got into a fight or did something, they end up in the box, which meant they were in a cell for 23 hours a day. And then they got out for an hour, and then they were able to walk around, secluded, of course, but they were in that space, or if they had visitors, and they could go see their visitors. And so I would come in and we would supposedly do CED stuff, but that really ended up talking and just giving them space to be out of their cell. But it was interesting that a lot of them experienced depression and other psychosocial issues by virtue of just being locked up 23 hours a day. So they would ask for stuff like newspapers, and they said they just wanted to smell the newspaper, right? Because they were mindful of being outside. So can you talk about the work that you were able to do? I know you created a piece from some of the poetry that you and some of your friends were able to work with those young men and women on. So can you talk about the work that you were doing?
Sure. I was at the correctional facility in Staten Island for 6 years, the last 6 years that it was open. What was unique about my situation is that I was one-on-one. At that time, I was told I was the only one-on-one in the state of New York. Most people go into a facility to work with a group or a class. And to your point with seeing mostly Black and Latino males, after my first month, I could finally get past the idea that I wasn't in there because everybody looked like me. So my work recently has been this book of poetry by a friend of mine on the island, Janine Otis. She compiled poetry by incarcerated youth, which a lot of that came from prisons in Virginia. And when I read it, I knew that that was my next song cycle. So it took from the time that I had the idea to finding the composer that could write the music, it took 5 years from the initial idea to actually see it on paper and to perform it. And it's called Who Am I? It's called that because 6 of those poems, the young people are saying, Lord, who am I? Why am I cursed like this? How did this happen to me? And so the songs deal with not just being in prison, but sexual abuse, early pregnancy, drug dependency, but also with hope, because there are a couple of the poems that are hopeful. There's one that we dedicated to the Newtown, Connecticut shooting, which that was December of what, 2012, because the first time I did this was in 2013. And since then, we know what gun violence has been in the country. So now when I perform that piece, it's a little over an hour, we dedicate that particular song to all of the victims of gun violence, because we've had Parkland, Florida, we've had, I mean, where haven't we had it, you know? So that was my work. My guy, I do want to give a shout out, his name is Lewis. He is out, he is working, and he's able to vote, which is another problem I have. I feel if you serve your time, you should be able to vote.
hmm hmm So Tia, why do you want to be a lawyer? What are you trying to, what wrongs are you trying to right? What systems are you trying to dismantle?
Um, I really want to work within our criminal justice system. When I was in middle school, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to be a lawyer at the time, but when I was in middle school, that was around the time where the Trayvon Martin murder occurred.
Mhm.
And I can just always recall myself asking all these questions. Why wasn't that man arrested? Why wasn't anyone held accountable? Why did he have to die like that? You know, I had to be around maybe 12 or 11 or 12 years old at the time. And when I think about it now, I just want to be an advocate for people who can't be an advocate for themselves. And I also just want to be a person who can effectively deliver justice in our system because justice has failed to like be delivered so many times already. And I just want to be one of the many people working effortlessly to just make sure hold our system to the standards that it should be held. You
Mhm.
know, and that is one of the passions that's just driving me to become a lawyer, to go through the tedious law school application process and take the LSAT. Yeah, I just want to do my part, you know.
You know, and
I feel like I'm sorry, and I just feel like naturally, the skills that I've acquired over the years, I have all the tools that I need to successfully do it. You know.
I'm reminded of how young you are because I remember the Trayvon Martin shooting and murder and I was actually in Hungary, Budapest, when the verdict came back. There was a non that they acquitted him, and so it was fascinating to watch how the world responded to that non-verdict, right? From not using from the American media lens but rather um, people from outside looking in. And they were just, all the media that I'd watched in Hungary um, were just fascinated by how someone could be murdered walking down the street um, and nobody was responsible for that murder, right? And I think that when we look at Breonna Taylor's death right now, that's
Yeah.
why people are in the streets of Kentucky, right? Because someone killed this woman and no
Yeah.
one is being held accountable, right? So the one police officer who was indicted, seemingly was indicted because he shot bullets into someone else's apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the indictments had nothing to do with her death, as if her death was warranted, and or her life didn't matter, right? So I think we need attorneys who are interested in dismantling a system of justice that may or may not have been designed for us. But I think sometimes it's doing exactly what it was designed to do
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
post civil rights or post Civil War. Um, the ways in which Reconstruction required access to free labor, right? Our criminal justice system began to really see its growth. Um, and so, how do we hold accountable a system that I think was designed to make sure that some folks were disenfranchised in ways that materially remove them from the very fabric of society? Um,
And to like piggyback off of that, a lot of the times, like these days after the news broke that Breonna Taylor's murderers were really going to truly be held accountable for their actions, I'm seeing a lot of younger folks on social media just, I guess, direct their anger at the wrong people. Um,
Mm.
I see that they think that the president of the United States should be the one to help deliver justice for Breonna Taylor. And in my head, I'm just thinking, no, this is why you vote. The local politicians and state leaders in that state, in Baltimore, they were the ones that were supposed to hold them accountable for those actions. They were the ones that were supposed to deliver what you guys wanted to be
mhm.
delivered for Breonna Taylor's death. And that's why you vote. That's why you vote in local elections for people who are going to give you that. just give you that. There are candidates out there who stand for what you want. You just have to go out and vote.
Right.
That's the problem. That's why the people who are in power now aren't doing that, because you did not participate in those elections to get those right people voted into those offices. That's why justice is not being delivered this very day.
So when we talk about that, can you talk about what you guys are doing through SGA to get our students registered to vote? And is there any specific push to try to get everybody registered to vote here in Louisiana, or are you working with them through absentee ballots so that they can be registered in their local community? What are you guys doing, and why is it important in your mind beyond, making sure that the Kentucky Attorney General does his job? If he doesn't, you vote him out. But what are you doing through SGA right now to make sure that Xaverians are registered and have access to voting?
So voter registration on campus is looking super different this year because of COVID-19. We obviously cannot, use laptops for everyone to touch and register to vote on the spot. So what we've been doing is we've been creating handbills with QR codes on them that will lead them to their home state's voter registration site if they want to register to vote back home and get their absentee ballots. Or we've also been giving students the option to fill out paper ballots to register to vote in New Orleans. And we've been finding that it's a good balance of both. Some students want to do their absentee ballots so their votes count back home, but a lot of students also want to vote in New Orleans. So we've been getting a good amount of feedback from students who are coming to our tables, engaging with us, and learning everything that they need to do to participate in the election process, this upcoming election. So we've been doing that. We've also been pairing it with social media initiatives on our SGA social media accounts, starting conversations on why voting is important and why, as students, it's important for us to vote in this upcoming election. And we're also, with that, we're also making efforts to host political watch parties, socially distanced, of course, with a maximum capacity set at a safe number. And yeah, we're just trying to help people understand what's at stake with this election as Black Americans, but also as students.
Exactly. Thank you. When we think about voting, so I probably voted a little longer than you, but Professor Turner, can you talk about remembering your first vote, when you first had the opportunity to vote? Because I know just a bit about you, and you actually helped integrate and start busing programs, right? You were one of the first little Black kids on a bus.
Yeah, in Iowa. That was the late 60s. And one of those people I'm still in touch with to this day outside of Chicago. She lives there now. But I remember that time when I started busing that Hubert Humphrey was running against Nixon. And I remember how even then, since I was one of the only Black people in my school, that when the teacher actually asked us, who are you going to vote for? I'm the only one who didn't say Nixon. And so right then, I saw the divide of, Republican, Democrat, white, Black. And so for us, it was so vital that we register to vote. And so I did that. See, I've been voting for so long, I can't even remember what age I registered, but I do know my first time to vote would have been in the mid to late 70s. And that would have been on the local scene. So then let's say that would have been around the time of Jimmy Carter, or just before when he was elected. And if I may say that right now with the students, I'm doing my best to make them aware that they should vote, because some of our students don't know that there was a Voting Rights Act and its importance, or that even the Supreme Court has knocked down some of those statutes in the Voting Rights Act, particularly that the states have to report back to the government how they are doing voting fairly. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little distressed by the fact that we need to work even harder to educate people within our community as opposed to want to sit back and complain and just say, oh, well, no, we have a stake in this.
Right, right. So I saw quick, for those students or folks who live around Xavier's campus, know that we are a polling place. So if students are registered to vote on campus with SGA's initiatives, they just have to roll out of bed and then come on over. We are actually getting our polling place moved from the University Center so that we have more space for people to be able to socially distance. Because when it's a regular election, it's in the University Center, there can be lines where we want to make sure that no one is denied the opportunity to vote just because the lines are too long, and that no one becomes sick because they risk their life to be able to vote. This weekend is the 60 something anniversary, and I'm not a mathematician. So 1957 to today, right? Of the integration of Little Rock Central High School.
Mm-hmm.
You had 9 kids who were being escorted into Little Rock Central High School by the National Guard. And actually, the President of the United States called National Guard initially because the governor wouldn't allow them to go to the school. And I remember a conversation with Daisy Bates, who was the woman from the NAACP who was working and was assigned that case. And she was talking to us on the 40th anniversary. A group of us from the University of Arkansas reenacted the Freedom Rise. We worked with Greyhound. Greyhound don't get the bus because the bus for Freedom Riders. So we took the bus from Fayetteville, Arkansas, down to Little Rock, and the then president of the MLK Commission worked with state police, unbeknownst to us, to stop us halfway there. And so we got to the Central High School, and we met with Mrs. Bates, and she talked about how her husband was the brains behind the operation. However, she was a small, non-threatening, light-skinned Black woman, and where he was a larger, bigger framed Black man, and they decided that she would be the person that would not threaten white people. So she would be the one who put her body on the line to get those kids in and out of that school. And to think, less than 65 years later, we're still in situations where around busing. There's conversations around segregated schools and access to fair and equitable education. And I just think, there's been so much that we've been able to get accomplished, but there's so much more to go, which is why next Supreme Court, it matters. One of the things on the line is affirmative action. So at Xavier, we are fortunate that we get to celebrate our Black brilliance unapologetically every single day. And I think for me, that is the best part about walking onto campus, is to see beautifully bronzed faces that no one questions how smart you are. They know you're smart or you wouldn't be here. I mean, we send more Black people to med school and graduate them than any other school in the country, Harvard included. But I didn't have that luxury. So I went to the University of Arkansas because there was an affirmative action-based scholarship. So that's how I was able to go through school, was on affirmative action-based scholarships. And if those weren't there, I wouldn't have had that opportunity because we just didn't have those kinds of resources. So I can only imagine, because I don't think we are where we need to be, to not need to force institutions to provide opportunities, right? Because they didn't necessarily say, we're going to give you so much money for being less prepared. They said, we're going to give you an opportunity because we recognize that we've not done so well through K through 12, and this is an opportunity for you to do your part. And that's at stake just as much as the voting rights provisions within the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 65. I want to make sure I'm seeing everybody's comments.
While you're doing that, I'm going to check in the oven for a minute.
I can smell my yams already. Can you smell yours?
I can't.
Oh, Lord. Oh, have mercy. Jesus. Yes.
Yes, I
I'm
can
a,
smell mine as
I'm,
well.
I'm a smelling, I'm a smelling, I'm a smelling. Yes, indeed. Now, I'm going to tell y'all one thing. I'm coming right back to the screen. Now I could turn my oven down because I got mine done quick. But sometimes I have my baster up here, so I will take my pan out and I will scoop up some of that sweet gooey goodness in my baster and make sure I put it on the top of them. Just make sure, because you don't want one tiny morsel of your yams to not have all that sweet gooey goodness on them. Now, when you look at them, if you decide that you need a little more brown sugar, do that. If you decide that you want to see just a little bit more color of the cinnamon on top, do that. But be careful, cinnamon can overwhelm a thing really quickly. So just do it sparingly. And then if you decide you want to put your miniature marshmallows on top of those once it's done, you put them on top, you put them back in the oven and let them brown, and you are good to go. As Vice President Wright knows, I will say it will make you want to slap your mama twice.
Well, anybody slapping anybody is harmless.
That's right. Well, no, and I would have some serious consequences, but you know what I mean. It's just that kind of good.
Well, that's like my mac and cheese. But one of the things, since I'm smelling my deliciousness as well, what we've learned with COVID is that there are disparities within our communities. Access to healthcare is one. But one of the other really challenging things that we figured out is that food insecurities have become illuminated with regards to people losing their work and people literally living paycheck to paycheck. And so now food lines have returned for the first time in any real meaningful way since the Great Depression. But we see people standing on lines at food banks to get food. 1 in 5 New Orleanians are food insecure, and 1 in 4 participate in SNAP, which really means that 64% of the children of Orleans Parish, 64%, I'll say that again, are income eligible for food nutrition programs. So that means that your income is 185% below the poverty line, at or below the poverty line. On campus, we've got Benson's Vault, which is a food pantry, so students can go and grab some things. We've also started work on a community garden, so there's more fruit, fresh produce. But it's not lost on me that everybody can't sit down in their kitchen and make this delicious candied yam dish, right? That's not a luxury that a lot of people here in New Orleans enjoy. When we think about this, particularly in the context of our upcoming elections, how do we begin to really help make sense and help create equity in what should be one of the most basic rights, and that's access to food? Food insecurity, for those people who are wondering, what does that mean? Typically, when we say food insecurity, it means I don't know where my next meal is coming from.
I have a question for you all down there in Louisiana. I mean, you do have community gardens where you teach people how to plant and grow their own foods. A couple of the projects here in Staten Island do that kind of thing. I mean, that's a start, but that's not enough because I see more produce being thrown away than I see being used. And I would start with, I worked for a law firm for a number of years. I would go by the Kentucky Fried Chicken and sometimes be able to get a free bag of chicken to give to homeless people as I was walking through Times Square. Now, hopefully I don't get this lady in trouble, but she would sneak trays of chicken and mashed potatoes out to homeless people because they throw it away. If it wasn't sold at the end of the day, it was their policy to throw it away. It's hard for me to understand us as people. I can't, and I don't know how you really correct that. I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be honest with you, because I'm more frustrated than able to think about a correction for that.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I worked at Starbucks for about a year. I resigned before the semester started to focus on law school and everything.
I hear you. Keep going.
I worked at Starbucks for about a year, and for the longest, we had the same issue to where it was company policy. We were required to throw out all of the food that we had left over for the day. And recently, they thankfully changed that policy to where we can start donating that food to local food pantries and homeless shelters for them to distribute amongst the homeless and hungry. And since then, we have not have been discarding as much food. But I don't know. I think it just takes outreach and activism to start making a difference in that way, because they would not have changed. Starbucks would not have changed their policies had it not been for our partner organization to advocate for that change. So it just takes out. I think it takes outreach and activism on behalf of doing all of that kind of stuff.
But I mean, to me, when you think about food insecurity, there's a vicious cycle, right? So, as
That too, though.
Professor Turner was talking earlier, he thinks some people, there's a benefit, right, for people to be sick because they can get that control. But if I can't focus as a young kindergartner or a kid in elementary school or high school because I'm hungry, I begin to make, I don't have have command of the learning that's happening. I may have to turn to other other ways to get money to be able to afford to be able to have food or access to those sorts of things. I just think it's to me, food insecurity is one of those things that the richest nation in the world shouldn't be still struggling with.
Yeah.
So also, we have students as Xavier who are food insecure. You spend $1,000 a week to go to school, right? You should not be in a space where you go into the food pantry, make sure you got enough to eat. And so I'm looking forward to folks and who's listening to us also to chime in. Someone said that gentrification has impacted community gardens, and that's so true. They would like to use theirs in the 7th Ward, but they really took it over and made them feel unwelcome, right? Turned it into gardening as a hobby versus those who actually need it. And I saw that a lot in Brooklyn. When I lived in Brooklyn, particularly in Bed-Stuy and East New York, where people were planting and growing things for the community, there were younger hipster types who moved into the community because they could get lower rent. And then it really wasn't foods. It really wasn't an opportunity for people to go in and sustain. You said, Tricia, garden as a hobby. Let's go out, let's do this sort of stuff, versus let's go out and let's take care of our community. Because then there were issues with who has the right to come in and access these things. What are we planting? Because in the neighborhood that I lived in when I first moved to East New York, Brooklyn, while kale may be a superfood, that was not one that folks was a staple of their diets. And so people wanted to make sure that it had kale, and there were beautiful flowers, and it was pretty, but it wasn't functional for those people who lived there. But it certainly made people comfortable. It was great to talk about and take pictures on Facebook of their beautiful, serene, peaceful community garden while folks live around them who are hungry. And I just, to me, food is the most basic resource that we should all be able to enjoy. But as you both were talking, multinational corporations are so concerned about, or really I'm sure it's lawsuits, that they throw away food before they allow somebody to take whatever's extra.
Well, and Vice President, right, we really, on some level, need to focus on our farmers because let's face it, at least some of the Iowa farmers that I've seen on TV are talking about trade deals that have really not worked well for them, depending on if they can't sell to other countries or if they can't get a fair price for their food. Or I'm thinking about even the hog market at home for those that eat pork. You know, there were so many pigs that had to be killed because they were getting too big for slaughter during COVID. And so then we have all this meat that's going to waste for those that, yeah, it's just, this is an incredibly horrible problem. I'm not even sure where to start with it. I just don't know.
So, were you gonna say something, Tia?
Yeah, Professor Turner, can you look at my yams real quick?
I surely can.
Let's see, tilt my camera down.
Oh.
Nice and candied. And for me, because what I'm going to do with mine, just either a spoon or a baster, and I'll just baste on top of those because I did that on mine.
Should I put it back in or no?
Huh?
Do you think they should go back in for a little bit longer on a lower temperature?
Were they bubbling when you took them out?
Yes.
Okay, well then no, they should be done. Now I can't, because mine are steaming hot. And so let me see, I don't know what I can do to bring this, let's see, this way. There are mine.
Ooh.
And they were bubbling and a spurting, and I just took a spoon or what have you and put some of that juice over them. Now, what I will tell both of you is that I shouldn't have used all of the butter that I used. I should have used a little less and a little more sugar, but they're still going to taste good.
So mine are still bubbling as well.
Yep.
And you see?
No, I can't.
Well, let me turn my computer down. Now, can you see?
Yeah, those are some good looking yams.
I'm spilling juice on it. But you know, I have a secret weapon. Because again, I haven't done dessert in so long. I have these, they're called dandies. Now, dandies are vegan marshmallows because I don't eat gelatin.
Okay.
Because I don't want to have horses or bone marrow in the food that I consume.
Right.
So I have handy dandy vegan marshmallows that I am going to layer, and I'm going to sprinkle some pecans on there too.
Okay.
And put them back in there just for that extra pop. Now,
that'll do it.
We have reached our 90-minute mark. So
No.
I would like, to thank you both for being a part of this conversation and the work that you've done and the work that undoubtedly you will continue to do. But I'd also like, as Tia is going to grab something else, any closing remarks that you might have.
Yes, Tia, make sure when you put it on that fork that you let it cool off, because you will burn off your tongue and everything else. Yes, I will tell you that seeing somebody, Vice President Wright, I'm so grateful to know you. And I will tell you that I do have hope for the world because I'm on the other side of the hill age-wise. But when I meet somebody like you, Tia Alexander, it lets me know that everything's going to be all right with the world. Remember that we are depending on you, and know that you are standing on the shoulders of a lot of people that came before you. Take a deep breath when times get rough. Remember that you are breathing in the breath of your ancestors, and they are there to support you in all of your efforts. I'm so proud of you and so pleased with knowing you this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Turner. I'm so thankful to have had the opportunity to talk with you and cook with you. I'm so excited to put this in my mouth right now. I'm trying to let it cool off. But you,
Curtis, you see, you're gonna do that little dance.
This is good, y'all.
Oh my God!
Yes, this is my new favorite dish. I'm gonna put some of them little marshmallows on there, though.
These are amazing.
Very. I wish y'all could taste it. Like there's some little girl who makes lip gloss and be on YouTube talking about y'all, this is really good. And I want to thank Professor Turner and Tia, and I want to encourage people to go out and vote. Make sure that you exercise that right that so many of our grandparents and great-grandparents fought and some died so that we might be able to sit here today on Cooking with Curtis and talk about. If you're voting by mail, do it early. If you are voting in person, wear your masks. If you vote by mail, consider being a poll worker. Go to your state's attorney, Secretary of State's office, figure out how to be a poll worker, because we do know that the poll workers are disproportionately senior citizens, and they are most impacted by this virus. So please consider being a poll worker if you've already cast your vote early. But also know that every one of us has an opportunity to do good work, and we do it in little ways. So you don't have to inspire the world through your voice like Professor Turner and spend time when he could have been out touring Europe in Great Hills, changing lives at a prison, or like Tia, who I am confident, as I said, will be a Supreme Court justice one day, or even as a president. But we all have a role to play, and that's what we've been doing here at Xavier, is thinking about how to create uncommon leaders. So I'm so proud that you got to meet one of them in Tia. And next Sunday, we are going to have with us on Cooking with Curtis one of Tia's classmates, Dominic Scott. Dominic is the student founder of the Collegiate 100, which is a chapter of 100 Black men. He's been don't burn yourself now. President of Knights of Peter Claver, a Catholic organization on campus. And he's also just been a dynamic student leader. He will be joined by Vice President of Enrollment Management, Kiana Scales. And they have been debating. I have to tell you, Professor Turner, when she saw the candied yams, she decided that her first dish wasn't sufficient enough. So she has been tossed around everything from breakfast casseroles to potato salad. But they're going to be cooking on that day, on next Sunday. And then on Sunday, October the 11th, we'll be joined by our SGA treasurer, Kayla Hinton, and one of our fantastic alums out of Florida named Dr. Angel Bettis. Both of them happen to be members of Alpha Kappa Alpha. And Kayla has decided the menu. We're gonna try to step it up big time, because she's gonna have us making jerk salmon, mango coconut rice, and asparagus.
Ooh.
So those are our next 2 episodes every Sunday at 3 o'clock. Please be on the lookout for the advertisement so that we can get you the Zoom links. But we're going to continue cooking, and we're going to continue talking until we inspire, or hopefully motivate folks to get out and vote. So with that being said, I'm going to Marshmallow's back on here, but George C. Wolfe, and I told some students the other day, that looks delicious, Tia. He in his play, The Colored Museum, he said, have y'all ever been to a party with one fool in the middle of the room, dancing harder, yelling louder than anybody in the entire place? And then he said, well, honey, that fool is me. And I want to keep dancing, keep laughing, keep using your voice, but also keep finding those moments to lead. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Peace.